The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, friends. Welcome to this 13th webinar on the Secret Teachings of All Ages by Manly P. Hall. This webinar series will be available on makara.us under Moria Federation Webinars, subheading Webinar Series in Progress, as shown here. Is your esoteric astrology still going, BL?
Yes, we have our final one next Saturday, 3 p.m.
And which pairs of opposites will be featured?
We've already done all of the astrological pairs of opposites, so this is going to be a wrapping it up and a little practical application within your chart.
Oh, great.
So this wraps it up, and then we were doing those on the second Saturday of every month, and David Hopper is starting a new series, Journey of the Soul, in that time spot, beginning on 10 October. So we hope you guys will join us for that.
Great. Okay. Both this and the Secret Doctrine series are also now available on YouTube. Just do a search for Francis. What?
Okay. Well, I guess somebody can't hear you, but I guess that means that it's their problem, because we can hear you just fine. So hold on, I'll go back.
Okay. Just do a search for Francis Donald's Secret Teachings or Secret Doctrine, like I have shown up at the top there, and it'll pull up the series. All right. Last month, we finished MPH's segment on Gnosticism and began reading about Serapis in a section called The Mysteries of Asar Hapi, who is actually a related but much earlier bull-headed Egyptian god. The later cult of Serapis originated in the Persian Empire but gained new life in Alexandria under the Greek Ptolemaic pharaohs. Perhaps the most pithy comment from last month's reading was MPH's observation that, quote, the material body of nature was called Apis. That's the Egyptian name for the bull. The soul, which escaped from the body at death, but enmeshed with the form during physical life, was designated Serapis. This idea is supported by the fact that the prefix ser, S-E-R, means fire, as in seraphim. So the enmeshed soul, or fire of the soul within the form aspect, becomes Serapis. We start this month's reading with a brief paragraph on labyrinths and mazes. Can we get somebody to read this 4 lines at the top?
Michael, can you do that, please?
Okay. Labyrinths and mazes were favored places of initiation among many ancient cults. Remains of these mystic mazes have been found among the American Indians, Hindus, Persians, Egyptians, and Greeks. Some of these mazes are merely involved pathways lined with stones. Others are literally miles of gloomy caverns under temples or hollowed from the sides of mountains. The famous labyrinth of Crete, in which roamed the bull-headed Minotaur, was unquestionably a place of initiation into the Cretan mysteries.
Thanks. Any thoughts or questions about this? In this paragraph, MPH seems to have temporarily put his discussion of Serapis on hold, instead shifting our attention to a consideration of the role that labyrinths play in initiation ceremonies, which is a good time to take a look at the second illustration on page 26. The text repeats the paragraph we just read, so no need to reread that. The animal at the center is a The animal at the center is a centaur rather than a minotaur, which, though opposites in one way, both represent animal man trapped in the personality from which the labyrinth offers an escape. Let's look at some examples of labyrinths and mazes from other cultures. Here's a pictograph of a circular Native American labyrinth, of a square maze with multiple entrances and exits, and of the famous Tohono Dohodam nation's man in the maze image, which is characterized by 7 concentric circles with a human figure and often a seed pattern in the center. Here's the Hindu Chakra Vyuha labyrinth, and most relevant to the cult of Serapis, a Greek labyrinth with Apollo slaying the bull-headed Minotaur at the center, a metaphor for the sun's dominion over the earth and for gaining sole control over the form aspect. The Minotaur was such a universally recognized symbol that it graced the center of most famous labyrinth construction in the Christian era, the labyrinth at Chartres Cathedral. It's gone now. They melted it down at some point for cannonballs. Though superficially similar, the guiding metaphors of labyrinths and mazes are actually very different. Mazes were constructed to confound those who enter, making it easy to get lost among its many dead ends, whereas labyrinths are always built as a continuous path from periphery to center. Among their many meanings, labyrinths can be seen as representing an individual's path through one life or through multiple incarnations. For the Theosophists, it can be seen as representing the phases of discipleship leading to initiation, which occurs at the very center. We might even speculate that the 6 semicircles at the center of the labyrinth at Chartres represent the first 6 initiations, with the 7th initiation, which DK describes as the true resurrection, symbolized by the very center. Not surprisingly, there are no records indicating this labyrinth's original intent, though we know that its construction was overseen by a master scarlet in 1200 AD. But perhaps the most notable labyrinth of all time was certainly among the ancients, it was the Greek-Egyptian labyrinth, thought by some archaeologists to have been built near Hawara, Egypt. Could we get a reader for this, please?
I'll read it. Maybe. Herodotus found the labyrinth already in ruins, but nevertheless, his admiration for the genius of its builders knew no bounds. He regarded it as far more marvelous than the pyramids themselves, and, as an eyewitness, minutely describes it. The French and Prussian savants, as well as other Egyptologists, agree as to the emplacement and identified its noble ruins. Moreover, they confirm the account given of it by the old historian. Herodotus says that he found therein 3,000 chambers, half subterranean and the other half above ground. The upper chambers, he says, I myself passed through and examined in detail. In the underground ones, which may exist till now, for all the archaeologists know, the deep keepers of the building would not let me in, for they contain the sepulchres of the kings who built the labyrinth, and also those of the sacred crocodiles. The upper chambers I saw and examined with my own eyes, and found them to excel all other human productions. In Rawlinson's translation, Herodotus is made to say The passages through the houses and the varied windings of the path across the courts excited me in infinite admiration as I passed from the courts into the chambers, and from thence into colonnades, and from colonnades into other houses, and again into courts unseen before. The roof was throughout of stone like the walls, and both were exquisitely carved all over with figures. Every court was surrounded with a colonnade, which was built of white stones, sculptured most exquisitely. At the corner of the labyrinth stands a pyramid 40 fathoms high, with large figures engraved on it, and it is entered by a vast subterranean passage.
Thanks, Bill. So Herodotus wasn't the only one to describe this this underground phenomenon. Strabo and other ancient historians also mentioned its existence. So the fact of that something existed there beneath the sands at Hewar or somewhere in Egypt is really without question. But you probably won't want to base a trip to Egypt on a visit to the labyrinths. If it exists, is completely unexcavated at this point. This is where the labyrinth might be. They don't even know for sure that it is at Hawar, right? The other thing about this is, from its description by Herodotus, with all its rooms and colonnades, etc. It obviously was much more than just a labyrinth, though the picture, let me bring it back, at the center suggests that a labyrinth, an actual labyrinth, was incorporated in that. This is clearly there were many other structures that in addition to the labyrinth, right? Amazing description. Even if it is 100th part true, would be an extraordinary wonder if it could ever be excavated. Okay, we turn to page 27 for the next paragraph. I always like to keep tabs on where we are in the big book, and this is what page 27 looks like. So if we could get a reader for this next paragraph, please.
Martha, can you do that for us, please? There you go.
There is considerable evidence that the famous statue of Serapis in the Serapturn at Alexandria was originally worshipped under another name as Sinope, from which it was brought to Alexandria. There's also a legend which tells that Serapis was a very early king of the Egyptians, to whom they owed the foundation of their philosophical and scientific power. After his death, this king was elevated to the estate of a god. Phylarchus declared that the word Serapis means the power that disposed the universe into its present beautiful order.
Thank you, Martha. So here's the site of the Temple of Serapis in Sinop, Turkey, which was part of the Persian Empire, where the monumental statue of Serapis originally stood. This last sentence is interesting. Disposing the universe into its present beautiful order is one way of describing the activities of a third logos type being, as Serapis was. So next up, any thoughts or questions about anything in this paragraph? You can always break in anytime you have a thought or question. Just interrupt and we'll see to it. Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What's this about Serapis? I know you had said earlier that this is not the Serapis that DK is referring to, but was he borrowing words to point to meanings? Because there seems like somehow this could describe the Serapis of the fourth way.
Yeah, exactly. It's, probably the strongest connection, because we don't have any information. DK didn't say anything about this cult of Serapis that exists, around the time of Christ, actually earlier, a couple of centuries before, at all, when he, introduces the master Serapis. But the fact that he's an Egyptian master, and that he lived in that time. We have records, that place him at that time. Certainly suggests a connection, that there was. Um, um, he could have even been the motive force behind the movement, as far as we know. But he certainly wasn't the god Serapis, the third logos, 7-in-1 god. He's a master of wisdom, not that level of logoic being. That would be more equivalent to a solar logos, right? The god Serapis, or a planetary one. There's arguments could be made about that. But see, the problem is we don't have the original doctrine at all with the Serapian cult. It was a completely hidden doctrine. So the details of the worship, or the understanding of the particular potencies, we can only get by association through the symbols that are oriented towards that cult, other symbols that also occurred. So the short answer is we don't really know, but there's great potential for it having a very strong and direct connections. Certainly is provocative, the fact of a master of wisdom named Serapis, and then this whole movement that lasted a long time too. It was 300 plus years unfolding. Any other questions about this before we move on? Okay, could we get a reader for this next reading?
Lynn, can you read that for us, please? You're self-muted. There you go. Thank you.
In his Isis and Osiris, Plutarch gives the following account of the origin of the magnificent statue of Serapis, which stood in the Serapeum at Alexandria. While he was pharaoh of Egypt, Ptolemy Soter had a strange dream in which he beheld a tremendous statue, which came to life, and ordered the pharaoh to bring it to Alexandria with all possible speed. Ptolemy Soter, not knowing the whereabouts of the statue, was sorely perplexed as to how he could discover it. While the pharaoh was relating his dream, a great traveler by the name of Serapis, coming forward, declared that he had seen such an image at Sinope. The pharaoh immediately dispatched Sotelus and Dionysus to negotiate for the removal of the figure to Alexandria.
Okay, interesting story, huh? The statue of Sinope may have looked something like one of these two. We do know that it was monumental, absolutely. But for me, the most interesting representations of Serapis incorporate a serpent's body, suggesting an association with the wisdom aspect of the Gnostic Abraxas, which originated in Egypt a few centuries after Serapis. Here he is with the serpentine Isis, and they were worshipped together in Alexandria. Referencing this association with the serpent, HPB gives us this from the second volume of The Secret Doctrine. Could we get a reader, please?
Karen, can you read that for us, please? You're self-muted. There,
Okay.
thanks.
It has been repeatedly stated that the serpent is the symbol of wisdom and of occult knowledge. The serpent has been connected with the god of wisdom from the earliest times of which we have any historical notice, writes Sannelin Wake. This animal was the special symbol of Thoth or Tot, and all of those gods such as Hermes and Seth who can be connected with him. According to Sir to Sir Henry Rawlinson, the most important titles of this deity refer to his functions as the source of all knowledge and science. Not only is he the intelligent fish, but his name may be read as signifying both life and a serpent, an initiated adept, and he may be considered as figured by the great serpent, which occupies so conspicuous a place among the symbols of the gods on the black stones recording Babylonian benefactions. Asclepius, Serapis, Pluto, Gnome, and Kneph are all deities with the attributes of the serpent. Says Dupius, or Dupius. They are
Dupuy.
Dupuy. Okay.
French.
They are all, they are all healers, givers of health, spiritual and physical, and of enlightenment.
Okay, so we get a little insight into the meaning of the serpent here, right? She says up in the middle there, he functions as the source of all knowledge and science, and then below it's always associated, the serpent is always associated with healers. I mean, even today, the sign of the healer, even on a pharmacy, has the serpents, right, surrounding the staff. Givers of health, spiritual and physical, and of enlightenment. And that takes us back to the all knowledge quality, right? So, the ancients had no problem with figures like this. This seems quite strange to, starting with the Christian era, to depict your focus of worship on, and remember how strange let's see here. Yeah, on the right there, it's a terrible image, but you have the Abraxas, right? How strange that figure was. We looked at that a few webinars ago with the rooster's head and the serpents connected to a human body. But the ancients really had no problem with symbolical reference, because they got the metaphor in a way that was somewhat lost, So, okay.
Francis?
Yeah.
Karsten has a couple of comments here. He says, the Sumerians, the fall of the first cities, the fall of civilizations, you can find it on YouTube. They talk about some gods which came from the water with wisdom. And he says, I think like Saturn, Makara, Pa, Sanskrit. Okay, let me unmute Karsten so he can explain a little. You're self-muted. There you go.
I've seen that YouTube today, and they're talking about some goddess who came from the sea, and for me, the description sounds like the Makara. The Capricorn is Makara on Sanskrit, the crocodiles.
Yeah.
The Capricorn has a tail like the sea goat. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Capricorn is very.
And they're talking about that, and it's very beautiful film about some of the things, but not so spiritual, but more historical. Yeah, I could recommend to see that if you have time.
Okay, that sounds interesting.
Karsten, if you can give me the name of the video, was that the first one? Or if you can give me the link, then what I can do is I can put that in the chat box so everyone can see it.
Okay, I'll try to share to you. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Karsten. Yeah, the water is the source of a number of things. It's first of all the unknown. It's the entire matter aspect. So, for instance, in Greek times, you were raised from the water by a net. The goddess Neith, that's the Egyptian equivalent, would raise you up out of the dark waters, right, which were considered to be the materiality. But it is also the cosmic astral. When you're looking especially at the crocodilian Makara quality, then you're looking at that source of pure love, which comes from the cosmic astral plane, and also of all mystery. You know, it's complete causality, you could say. I mean, yeah, theosophy also has the cosmic mental, you know, which is even beyond that. But in terms of the ancients, it was understood as the source of all mystery in that sense. So it has an above and below meaning in that way. Okay. Can we get a reader for the second half of this paragraph, please?
Joan, can you read that for us, please? You're self-muted. There you go. Thank you.
3 years elapsed before the image was finally obtained. The representatives of the pharaoh finally stealing it and concealing the theft by spreading a story that the statue had come to life, and walking down the street leading from its temple, had boarded the ship prepared for its transportation to Alexandria. Upon its arrival in Egypt, the figure was brought into the presence of 2 Egyptian initiates, the Eumolpid, Timotheus, and Manetho the Sebonite, who immediately pronounced it to be Serapis. The priests then declared that it was equipollent to Pluto. This was a masterly stroke, for in Serapis, the Greeks and Egyptians found a deity in common, and thus religious unity was consummated between the 2 nations.
So any thoughts or questions? Equipollent just means equivalent in power, effect, or significance. So what they're saying here is that in that recognition of Serapis, he was made to be equal in power to these other gods mentioned, most notably Pluto, right? Here's a bust of an Alexandrian Serapian priest. Earlier, we discovered the close association between, before we go on, I wanted to comment on this story. This idea that they stole this this statue. This thing was, you know, at least 20, probably 30 feet tall. You know, I find it difficult to believe that they stole it in the sense of by stealth, you know, like one night it just wasn't there. I mean, this would have been a huge operation involving, you know, all kinds of equipment and dozens of people. So it's you know, there's something not quite right about that story. At any rate, so the Greek version of this, let's see, in the last webinar, we found that there's a close association between Yama, the Hindu god of death, and Serapis, and here Pluto is mentioned. The Greek version can be found in the story of King Adonis, which is a retelling of the legend of Hades kidnapping Persephone. Remember that? Where she was only able to come into the regular world, I think 3 months of the year, and had to spend 9 months in Hades. Anyway, the association between the mythical king and the lord of the underworld was so close that the latter was often called Hades Adonis, who seemed to be all but identical with Serapis. In both these gods, we find a lord of souls from the point of view of judge of the dead, a concept also related to Osiris and central to the ancient Egyptian belief. Next up, can we get a reader for this, please?
Carrie, can you read that for us, please?
Several figures of Serapis that stood in his various temples in Egypt and Rome have been described by early authors. Nearly all these showed Grecian rather than Egyptian influence. In some, the body of the god was encircled by the coils of a great serpent. Others showed him as a composite of Osiris and Apis. A description of the god that in all probability is reasonably accurate is that which represents him as a tall, powerful figure, conveying the twofold impression of manly strength and womanly grace. His face portrayed a deeply pensive mood, the expression inclining towards sadness. His hair was long and arranged in a somewhat feminine manner, resting in curls upon his breast and shoulders. The face, save for its heavy beard, was also decidedly feminine. The figure of Serapis was usually robed from head to foot in heavy draperies, believed by initiates to conceal the fact that his body was androgynous.
Thanks, Carrie. Any thoughts or questions about this, or about androgyny? This is a metaphor for a melding that happens at the sixth initiation between the Davic and human kingdoms. It's literally when the human kingdom is left for the in this process of androgyny, right? And so, in a sense, all gods are androgynous, and there's ample proof of this. That, you know, Jehovah literally means Jehovah, and are like man, woman, and united. God of man and God who is man and woman. Zeus, there's many indications in the stories about Zeus of his androgyny. So this is indicative of that synthesis of the feminine masculine aspects, right? Okay, here are some additional depictions of Serapis. And here we have a sculpture that illustrates Serapis's androgyny. It's here, actually, rendered in the style of the two-faced Janus. But going back here, you see the horns on the left. That's another symbol of dualism, of that fundamental dualism. It's also very Capricornian in that sense, the earth element. Of course, Serapis, in the association with the bull, is also earth through Taurus. But look at this figure. The androgyny is just literally depicted, right? And finally, we have these photos of Serapis captured by our very own Joanna White. I don't know if Joanna's with us today, but she snapped these photos while visiting a show called Treasures of Ancient Egypt, Sunken Cities at the Virginia Museum of Fine Art. You can take a virtual tour of some of the key pieces in the show at the Virginia Museum website, whose address is in your chat box. Did you put it in there yet?
Yes, I did. I put it
Okay,
in
great.
there before we put the one, it's above the one from Karsten. So
Okay, so this is really cool. You can, what's particular about this is, you know, you could, at first my thought was, you know, it's a minor museum compared to, you know, the big museums in the world. But what's particularly great about this is that there are two cities that were completely sunken at the delta of the Nile. And they discovered them and brought them up and excavated. So it's completely new items, and there was a lot connected with Serapis. So it's worth taking a look over there. You can click on, you know, all these titles and see the show. it's very interesting to read the content. I think you'd enjoy it. Anyway, next up, could we get a reader for this segment?
Okay, Trudy, can you read that for us, please?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Various substances were used in making the statues of Serapis. Some undoubtedly were carved from stone or marble by skilled craftsmen. Others may have been cast from base or precious metals. One Colossus of Serapis was composed of plates of various metals fitted together. In a labyrinth sacred to Serapis stood a 13-foot statue of him reputed to have been made from a single emerald. Modern writers discussing this image state that it was made of green glass poured into a mold. According to the Egyptians, however, it withstood all the tests of an actual emerald.
Thank you. I want to say before too, if I want to thank Joanna for her contribution, and just invite any of you who visit an exhibition and you see something that might be relevant to a webinar, just let me know. Send me. So let's continue. This is very much related to what we just read. If we could get a reader, please.
Okay, Maria, can you read that for us, please?
Am I unmuted?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Clement of Alexandria describes a figure of Serapis compounded from the following elements. First, filings of gold, silver, lead, and tin. Second, all matter of Egyptian stones, including sapphires, hematites, emeralds, and topazes, all these being ground down and mixed together with the coloring matter left over from the funeral of Osiris and Apis. The result was a rare and curious figure, indigo in color. Some of the statues of Serapis must have been formed of extremely hard substances, for when a Christian soldier carrying out the edict of Theodosius struck the Alexandrian Serapis with his axe, that instrument was shattered into fragments and sparks flew from it. It is also quite probable that Serapis was worshipped in the form of a serpent, in common with many of the higher deities of the Egyptian and Greek pantheons.
Okay, any thoughts about either of these two paragraphs? MPH reveals the subject of the, revisits the subject of the destruction of the Alexandrian temple of Serapis towards the end of this section, at which point we'll take a closer look at that. The fact that a statue of Serapis was composed of ground down precious, semi-precious stones and all these different metals suggests that, to me, that we're going way beyond the appearance of the thing, that we're really looking into alchemical and magical intent, just in the use of these. You don't ground down an emerald and mix it with tin and lead, etc., in order to present a certain look. It's to magnetize or to empower the statue with very particular qualities, right? So I have no doubt that this was, at least this statue, which is clearly different than the statue that was hauled in from Sinope in Turkey, had powerful magnetic qualities, and was clearly hardened to such a degree that it could shatter an axe. That's amazing. right? And then there's this other aspect, which is this second ray indigo color of it. You know, we know the master Serapis as being a fourth ray master, but Serapis as a god would be a representation of the solar logos, who is, of course, the second ray logos. So, you know, it's those kinds of insights. It's all we have. We have no doctrine. There's, you know, they didn't leave anything behind. It was a real secret society. But we had these types of suggestions, you know, that indicate the possible attributes of the God and the doctrine, right? Okay.
Francis?
Yeah.
Chris asks, what is meant by the matter left over from the funeral of Osiris and Apis?
Yeah, that's a good question. The matter usually would be ceremonial objects that were used in the process. And you see, I'm actually very glad you brought this up, because these would be additional potent objects to be included in this total material, right? So yeah, they would be ceremonial objects that would be evidently also ground down. That could be, those ceremonial objects, you know, could be oil lamps, amulets, you know, papyri, any kind of sacred object connected with it, you know. Other smaller statues, who knows? Okay, next up, can we get a reader, please?
Okay, but first, Anne Veronica has a question.
Sure.
Well, a thought. Hercules, when he was an infant, killed in the Greek myth the two serpents that were sent to kill him. I wonder, what is the symbolism behind the myth?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's related to this idea of using serpents for deity. Actually, I think in this presentation, I have a picture of the infant Heru, who was the Egyptian version of Heracles, and it represents the pairs of opposites. So the youthful Heru would be the god man as an infant, who would be the first initiate. That's the infant aspect of it. But then as he grows to a young boy, who is the Heru, then he would have had mastery over the pairs of opposites, which is represented by the two pairs of serpents held by either hand, you know, outstretched. And they would be indicative of overcoming the pairs of opposites of the astral and the which are called in theosophy glamours, and then the illusions of the mental plane. And so it would be indicative of his mastery over the planes of human endeavor. He also usually is standing on two crocodiles in that image that you're referencing, and those are, you know, are further indication of his mastery of duality. Okay, yeah, the special thing about Heracles is that he's an initiate. He is half god, half man, right? And so he shows the way, whereas the pure deities described, you know, in the ancient cults were not human. Of course, in theosophy, we know that all come up through the human kingdom into the realm of deity. Okay, so let's see, we're here to read, right? Okay, so could we get a reader for this?
Yvonne, can you read that for us, please? You're self-muted.
Serapis, called Theon Heptagrammaton,
or the god with the name of 7 letters. The name Serapis, like Abraxas and Mithras, contains 7 letters. In their hymns to Serapis, the priests chanted the 7 vows. Occasionally, Serapis is depicted with horns or a coronet of 7 rays. These evidently represented the 7 divine intelligences manifesting through the solar light. The Encyclopedia Britannica notes that the earliest authentic mention of Serapis is in connection with the death of Alexander. Such was the prestige of Serapis that he alone of the gods was consulted in behalf of the dying king.
Okay, thank you. Any thoughts or questions about this paragraph? Though we have no direct surviving texts on the Serapian belief system, the name Tion Heptagrammaton in and of itself tells us all we need to know to identify Serapis as a solar creator god, the 7 in 1, which we are coincidentally studying in the Secret Doctrine series under the Secret Doctrine series under the name of Oeaohu the Younger, Prajapati, Brahma, Avalokiteshvara, and Jehovah. And so far in this series as Belinus, Ahura Mazda, Abraxas, Odin, and now Serapis. They're all essentially the same, though some, like Serapis and Odin, are more easily placed at our systemic level than on cosmic levels, but they are all the same 7 in 1 creator god. Apparent differences come from the cultural emphasis or bias of the followers. The 7 vowels are an extremely esoteric subject, having to do with the symbology of the serpent of wisdom, as seen, for example, in this Gnostic symbol, with the power of sound, the word, and especially the septenary potency of invocation. Could we get a reader for this short passage?
Sure. And Veronica, can you read that for us, please? You're self-muted.
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. The Gnostics' office contained the same triple symbolism in its 7 vowels as the 1, 3, and 7 syllabled Oeaohu of the archaic doctrine, i.e. the 1 unmanifested logos, the 2nd manifested the triangle connecting into the quaternary or tetragrammaton, and the rays of the later on the material plane.
Okay, thank you. That's the
May
triangle.
May I say something?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yes. Theon heptagrammaton, the words that were before, means the divine 7 letters, and now tetragrammaton that I read mean 4 letters. They are Greek words.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And in that, we have the clue, even though we don't have any doctrine, we have a strong clue as to the identity of Serapis, the fact that he was called by his followers. Tion was just as the name for God, deity. And then hepta, meaning 7, as you say, the 7-syllabled or 7 qualities, of the unmanifested logos. But in that unmanifested one, we have inherent the 2nd manifested, the triangle, which concretes into the quaternary or tetragrammaton. That's the 4ness of creation. And altogether, it's the heptagrammaton. Okay. Let's see here. Gerald Massey, it's an extraordinary man who lived in the 19th century, describes a 7-voweled chant of priests in tribal Africa. The term clickers, as here used refers to a form of speech still spoken in sub-Saharan Africa. Could we get a reader for this short passage?
Chris, can you read that for us, please?
The clickers inhale the air to articulate their sounds, and the utterers of the seven-vowel chant exhale their breath towards heaven, the height being scaled and the summit of religious aspiration very literally attained by the ascent of the seven vowels. And the brethren utterance of the letters composing the ineffable name was noted on the planetary orbit lines of the celestial scale. Wow.
Yeah, it's an amazing pair of books, by the way. And he uses a very unusual word here. It's not brethren, but it's breathen, the breathen utterance. So it's the out-breathed utterance of the letters composing the ineffable name, right? So we can see, that this idea of the seven vowels, which composes is an aspect of the sevenfold one, you'll find it everywhere, including here in sub-Saharan Africa, right? I was watching a episode of The Voice. Does everybody know what that is? It's kind of like Britain's Got Talent, and this woman came on and sang using these clicking sounds as as a putting forward for consideration for these judges, so it was truly an east or southeast meets west kind of moment, to have this. And it was absolutely extraordinary to hear these particular sounds, which are almost impossible to duplicate unless you've been trained in how to speak them or utter them. But it's worth an investigation. Okay, and finally we have the deep esoteric understanding that HPB brings to this in The Secret Doctrine a little later in the book. Could we get a reader for this?
Michael, can you read that for us, please?
Okay. And this true and perfect serpent is the seven-lettered God who is now credited with being Jehovah, and Jesus one with him. To this seven-voweled God, the candidate for initiation is sent by Christos in the Pistis Sophia, a work earlier than St. John's Revelation, and evidently of the same school. The serpent of the seven thunders uttered these seven vowels. But seal up those things which the seven thunders uttered, and write them not, says Revelation. Do ye seek after these mysteries? Inquired Jesus in the Pistis Sophia. No mystery is more excellent than they, the seven vowels. For they shall bring your souls unto the light of lights, i.e., true wisdom. Nothing, therefore, is more excellent than the mysteries which ye seek after, saving only the mystery of the seven vowels, and their 49 powers, and the numbers thereof. These seven vowels are represented by the swastika signs on the crowns of the seven heads of the serpent of eternity in India, among esoteric Buddhists, in Egypt, in Chaldea, etc., etc., and among the initiates of every other country. It is on the seven zones of post-mortem ascent in the Hermetic writings that the mortal leaves on each one of his souls or principles until, arrived on the plane above all zones, he remains as the great formless serpent of absolute wisdom, or the deity itself. The seven-headed serpent has more than one signification in the arcane teachings. It is the seven-headed Draco, each of whose heads is a star of the lesser bear. But it was also and preeminently the serpent of darkness, i.e., inconceivable and incomprehensible, whose 7 heads were the 7 logoi, the reflections of the one and first manifested light, the universal logos.
Thank you, Michael. So the very end there, kind of working from the bottom up, we're looking on cosmic levels there. I mean, you know, she's talking about the the great and lesser bear. So the universal logos also is always a tip off when you get all caps that you're at the highest cosmic levels. And then you have the spirits before the throne, which are always 7. And it's the first breakout, you could say, of the unmanifested. And it's those 7 powers that are, that's why the logos is called the 7 in 1. And it's from that all creation and all diversity is manifested, comes forth, right? And of course, for Theosophists, that's very much connected with the 7 rays. You could say that those 7 logoi embody the 7 fundamental streams of creation, right? Okay,
Francis?
and then, yeah.
Sorry. Chris has a question about the previous slide where it said the planetary orbit lines.
Yeah. Okay.
That's her question. What
are they?
you know, it must have been an earlier slide than this. Yeah, where it said that it was the names were inscribed in the planetary orbit lines.
Okay.
You know, that old solar system model that has all the information that's hard to read because it's
right.
so tiny.
Well, also there's another meaning to the orbit lines. You know, in a way you could say that the planet is itself is a materialization or densification of a potency that is unseen that inhabits that planet. But here's something that most people don't think about, which is that the pathway around the sun is as defining of the planetary energy as that hard piece of material planet itself. In fact, probably much more esoteric than the planet itself. So in terms of defining the, you know, we've heard the music of the spheres, in terms of the definition of the note and therefore the quality of the planet, you would have an association in these orbit lines that you won't have in the planet itself. Somebody did a wonderful graphic that showed the geometrical relationships between each of the orbits of the planet, and it's astonishingly interrelated according to very basic geometric figures. And that to me is further proof of the non-randomness of the occurrence of the path of the orbit around the sun. So I would say that these 7 vowels are, in a sense, in expression through these orbits or orbit lines, you know, and he's indicating that the celestial scale, right, like a musical scale. It's, you know, as we all know, there are 7 notes in a major scale and 7 sacred planets, 7 vowels. Any other questions? I was going to point out here the 7 vowels and their 49 powers. Of course, you know, we have 49 subplanes in the 7 planes of the cosmic physical plane. And we also have 49 sub-ashrams, or ashrams, that are expression of the hierarchy, right? So 7 major ashrams, and in each of those 7 sub-ashrams representing combinations of the rays. So that could be seen as the powers, right? Even though at the time of HPB that wasn't revealed yet. She kind of hints at things that DK then later reveals, right? And then we have this wonderful information from Pistis Sophia. It's definitely on my reading list. And for other reasons too. You just find, like HPB at the end of her life, did a series of lectures on Pistis Sophia, right? And the very end of Transactions of the Blavatsky Lodge, which comments on the first 4 stanzas of Zahn. The last 2 pages are quotes from the Pistis Sophia because they so directly address the 6th verse of the 4th stanza of Zahn. So it's a treasure trove. It's not just, you know, this this other gospel, you know, that occurred. It's an amazingly esoteric gospel, and it's certainly no mistake that it survived, even though Theodophilus was hell-bent on destroying everything related to Gnosticism. Okay, let's see.
Francis,
Yeah.
Yvonne says 7 chakras and 49 smaller chakras.
Okay, right. It's a system that's ever recurring, especially in terms of delineating the manifested reality. 7 is a number, a form number. And so you find that wherever you have reference to 7-ness, you have some indication of manifestation.
And then Christy, we got a couple of hands up, but Christine says the first line seems like a throwaway line, credited Jehovah and Jesus as one.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. Jehovah is a male-female duality. Jesus as the third aspect, the son, or second principle. So you have spirit, form, and that which connects them, the second principle, right? And so I think that's the point of this, that it's the alpha omega and that which connects them manifests as the 7, right? But yes, much less esoteric than what follows, certainly. Let's see, is there anything else? This is a gold mine. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Maria, Maria is asking for the where we can find the Pistis Sophia online, and I am going to put that in the chat box. Okay.
We've offered it before in the webinar, so you should have
right. Yeah, there's a PDF available of it. I mean, I just Googled it. It may not be the same one as before, but Carrie's got his hand up, so I'll do that Carrie, while you guys discuss.
Great. Before you ask, Carrie, I'll just want to say that these PDFs vary. You know, all you have to do is Google, you know, for instance, Pistis Sophia PDF, and you're going to get a bunch of sites that have it, right? They vary in quality, right? So if you're really thinking about reading it, look over, you know, don't settle for the first one you download if it's not great, you know, because usually on these old texts you can find some version that's good, especially one as famous as Pistis Sophia. By the way, Manly Hall doesn't reference it because it hadn't been translated in his day. It wasn't translated from the Latin until, I don't know, the 40s or something. So he didn't have it available. You know, he would have in his section on the Gnostics that he would have referenced it, but he mentions it, but he doesn't really reference it. Yes, Carrie, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, I don't think you mentioned it, but these appear to be on the left-hand drawing at the top. They appear to be goats, and
I
they're all
know, they
them.
do, don't they?
Their mouths are in different positions, which suggests they're all doing the 7 vowels.
Oh, that's great, Carrie. I love that. Wow, that's
And
interesting.
then the 7 bands on each neck make the 49 powers, of course. So the 7 vowels and the 49 powers
One,
are
two,
right
three,
there.
4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah. You know, what's interesting too is that the goat is connected with Capricorn as well as the Makara, and you know, which is the source in the cosmos of this mystery, this 7 vowel mystery. So it's yeah, it's a deeply esoteric symbol and kind of comical at the same time, and it represents the 7-armed swastika, which is a powerful, you could say, talisman that represents the creative aspect. And certainly the 7 vowels, as you pointed out. Thanks for that.
While I'm on, Francis, something's been bugging me from way back. I wonder if you could go back to the last slide of the mazes.
Oh, that's good. Okay, hang
Some
on.
way back. Yeah, the Egyptian one, the big Egyptian one.
Okay, let me make sure. Now I'm at 57. Okay, so I don't want to lose that. And you know, it's amazing how quickly you go through so many. So here we go. And which one were you interested
It's
in?
the very last one of the mazes. Yeah, that's the one.
There you go. Okay.
I was in the business of trying to count around the maze. Appear to be 12 boxes, I think, for.
That's interesting because
12.
in the
I
shard
wonder if
you also have 12 rings if you include the central. So,
and they seem to be zodiacal signs in the center of each one, more or less.
could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 in the center. 9. Let's see, 5 and 4 in the very center there. Where are you seeing the?
No, I
12?
mean the outside
Oh,
there are 12 boxes.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Each of them has got 16.
4, 6.
In the center, it seems to be well, they're not big enough to see actually, but they just seem to be astrological signs.
They could well be, and each of these could be dedicated to, you know, a magical process of connecting with each of these signs. I haven't looked at it closely enough to analyze it to that degree because it was a tangent from, you know, the Serapis, so I didn't really go in. But when we get to the Egyptian stuff, we will.
Yeah, there's 12 figures along the side as well, all sides.
Yeah.
Francis, while I'm on, I'm sure you'd be fascinated with in Glastonbury, you know, in the south of England,
right?
The Glastonbury Tor, which is the big mountain with the church on the top, has got a maze running around it. And I actually walked that maze. It's a couple of miles when you walk it all together, and it's actually in the form of a real maze. And it's just fantastic. I've never seen anything like it.
Let's see what we come up with.
You have to put maze in, I think. Yeah, you can see it in the 4th.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it, yes.
Let's see, I'm trying to find it good. Okay, here's a kind of a painting of it, this is a typical maze, and it was, I think, made famous by this Glastonbury tour. You see this reproduced a lot when examples. Here it is in 3D. drawing of it in 3D. It's too small though. Here's
It's
a
actually not as clear as that. It's hard to find your way, actually. You can only find it by indentations in the ground.
Is this it?
No, it's the one you had before. Yeah, these pictures here.
Okay.
No,
Oh, I
it's
see.
another one.
Like this one.
Yeah, it's that one,
That's
yes.
okay. Fascinating. Yeah.
And just around, you see the fields around and all how the streets around. Most of them have got astrological names, like
Really?
Leo. Yeah, the street names and the house names are all.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's 12. That's actually divided up into 12. The whole
Amazing.
town is divided into 12. Yeah, it is amazing.
And of course, then the tower itself, which is tower, here it is. There we go. And you can see how faint it is, as you were saying,
Yeah.
the indications, right? This trail is ignoring those lines. It would be like the central point. It'd be, the center of the maze, and therefore, the source of divinity. Very
Actually,
cool.
it's not the center of the maze because
Oh, it's not?
the maze predates the church, the building. Yeah, it's much more ancient than that.
Well, yeah, but wouldn't they have integrated
I think
the building?
probably it's somewhere. It's not quite there, but I know it's close to it.
Okay. Thank you. That's great, Carrie. Okay.
Okay.
We're getting pretty informal around here, but that's all right.
And then,
yeah,
we got another hand up, and Veronica says, I was thinking about the atom and the electrons. If they change orbit, that means a different energy status. If it changes orbit, it takes in or gives out energy. Also, the geometry behind the orbit of a planet. Do you mean something like the rose pattern that Venus makes in the sky?
well, the rose pattern that Venus makes, it's a five-fold pattern, is as seen from Earth. It's not intrinsic to Venus, but what it reveals is its relationship to Venus, which is all the more astonishing because in theosophy, of course, Venus is the fifth ray planet, right? And so you have this five-fold pattern, which is like a rose, you're right, that indicates a relationship to the Earth, right? But yes, you're right. It's just that kind of thing. You can, if you put the concentric circles, if you lay them out, it's hard to describe an image, but there are precise geometrical forms. I think, I'm almost sure I used this, BL, in my series on sacred geometry where I showed this, that using standard specific geometrical two-dimensional forms, it absolutely delineates the distances between the planets, right? Okay.
All right. I'll see if I can find, oh, here we go. 8-year cycle of Venus and the pattern that it makes. Let me see if I can find a image of that I could just put in the chat box so people can look at it.
Great.
If they can Google it. Okay. Trudy's got her hand up.
Okay.
Trudy, go ahead.
I just wanted to say about the Glastonbury tour. It's an energy line where the Michael and Mary lines meet on top of the tour.
Interesting. I'm not versed enough to know what those two lines are, but I know that the nexus of these ley lines are of importance, energetically important. Yeah. They're like magnetized as a result, and they form a potency that you can partake of, that they're revitalizing if you can tune into these energies.
Yes.
Okay. Anyone else? I love it when.
Yes. Joan, go ahead. yourself there. There you go.
Any thoughts on the diagram, the picture on the right-hand side of this page?
Well, let's see. I didn't really study it, so I'm just kind of looking at it now. You see the 7 sacred planets indicated with Saturn pointing down, and there's a kind of some indication that this is a personification of Saturn, and it's that the dark ray, because it's oriented. Notice that at the bottom it's oriented towards the cube, which is always the quality of manifestation. But the entire sevenness of this, especially inverted 7-pointed star, is going to be oriented towards physicalization or manifestation, right? Saturn is a third-rate planet, and its rings represent the ring past naught. It's the physical permanent atom of the cosmic physical plane, so it's very much oriented towards manifestation, right?
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. It's also a conditioning planet, along with Mercury, for disciples. And then it appears again at the 4th initiation when you are leaving the entire physical, that is to say, the human lower quaternary behind. It reappears.
And Francis,
yep.
You also have the circle imposed upon the triangle with spirit on the right-hand side, soul,
right.
I think, on the left-hand side, and body at the bottom.
Right, exactly. It's the 3 principles up here. It's a good point. And, you know, the circle is imposed upon the triangle. And so you have this 3 fundamental principles, right, of deity, spirit, which is the second principle, the solar aspect, and then the material realm. Yeah. Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. This is, this will be a fascinating study just right here in and of itself, to look at this. It's always like, where do you draw the line? It's on Serapis, and here we are in 7 vowels, but all of it hopefully helps to reveal, what certainly was an important part of the Serapian cult. The fact goes all right back to that idea that, it's the septagrammaton. This is the septagrammaton right here, the 7 rays of the one and 7. Okay, anyone else? We may just stay here the rest of the time.
That's it for right now.
That's it, okay. All right, so we read this about, occasionally Serapis is depicted with horns or a coronet of the 7 rays. These evidently represent the 7 divine intelligences manifesting through the solar light. So we've been describing that. Those would be the 7 in both images would be the 7 intelligences, which equate to the 7 rays. They equate to the 7 planetary logi. So they're also the macrocosmically the 7 spheres before the throne, right? Okay, this is probably the image with the 7 rays that MPH references in the text. I could find no others. It may or may not be. It's one of the more esoteric images of Serapis that I was able to find. And then before we saw that image of Serapis with the horns, so that those 2 indicate the fact that it is a septenary being, right? Okay, then next up, can we get a reader for this?
Yes, Karen, can you read that for us, please?
The Egyptian secret school of philosophy was divided into the lesser and the greater mysteries, the former being sacred to Isis and the latter to Serapis or Osiris. Wilkinson is of the opinion that only the priests were permitted to enter the great mysteries. Even the heir to the throne was not eligible until he had been crowned pharaoh, when by virtue of his kingly office he automatically became a priest and the temporal head of the state religion. See Wilkinson's Manners and Customs of the Egyptians. A limited number were admitted into the greater mysteries. These preserved their secrets inviolate.
Thanks, Karen. Any thoughts or questions about this? The lesser mysteries were associated with Isis because she represented the nurturing terrestrial aspect in subjugation to the solar aspect, the greater mysteries, represented in Alexandria by Serapis and Osiris. Theodosius wrote, "For this cause, the body of the goddess is covered with continuous rows of udders to declare that the universe is maintained by the perpetual nourishing of the earth or nature." Well, obviously there was no internet then. You couldn't check on it because actually it is Diana of Ephesus that is depicted thusly. No surviving depictions of Isis show her depicted in this way, but the point is taken that she's a nurturing goddess in both cases. It's the nurturing lesser mysteries because having to do with the physical realm. Also has to do in terms of the progression for initiates or acolytes from one school to the next. It would have to do with purification. You would go through the lesser mysteries to purify the personality nature and to prepare it for the greater mysteries. And there's always only a few that make it from one to the next, right? Gerald Massey gives us a provocative insight. Yeah.
Sorry. And Veronica asked if you can go back to the image we were looking at a minute or two ago. She says that the cube has 5 stars around it. There is also a raven, and she thinks a mermaid.
Okay. Yep. The word corpus really tells it all, doesn't it? Anything else you wanted to say about that? You just wanted to point that out?
Yourself,
the mermaid.
Can I talk?
Yes.
First of all, what does corpus, does it mean body?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so the form aspect.
I was, okay, thank you. I wasn't talking about this image. I was just pointing out because I think the raven, we have talked about the raven, haven't we talked about the symbol of the raven? I think we have talked in this webinar. That's why I wanted to point out that it has a raven, and I think on the bottom left it's a mermaid. And I wanted the next image, the one that you showed with Serapis, and on the left there was the serpent that was going round,
right,
and it had 5 circles. I see that it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 circles, and with each circles it has a Scorpio, a lion, I think that's a bull, a Taurus. And
yeah, so what does that tell you? What did those signs tell you? What did they make up?
I think it must be the initiations, isn't it?
Well, it's the fixed cross, which is the cross of
oh, yes, yes.
Of discipleship, right? And you can kind of see that it's, the original statue of which this is a drawing, unless it's just a conceived statue, you never know. That you see Gemini twins here showing that there's this progression from Taurus to Gemini, going around, Cancer over here, probably, and then finally coming to Leo, and then passing on to what might be the Virgin and Virgo, right? And then around to Libra, which is out of sight, and then Scorpio. So it's a progression, ending in Pisces probably, right?
So that down there is a fish.
Yeah. What about the fish?
That exactly where the arrow is, it looks like a fish. That's a fish. A fish or a snake.
At the bottom, you mean?
Yes, where the arrow is. The end of a snake. It looks something.
Well, it looks to me like a serpent's head right here.
Yes.
And then you have the two fishes of Pisces, which would be the last sign, because you start at the top with Aries and go all the way around to there. But it's interesting to note, and I'm glad you brought this forward, because I hadn't seen that the signs that predominate are Leo, are the fixed signs, right? Which is discipleship. And of course, that would be, thanks for pointing that out.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, let's see, where are we? So we were talking about Theodosius, right, and that goddess. And weren't we just about to, I think we were just about to read this. If we could get a reader for this. This is a quote about the lesser mysteries that are described in the Egyptian lesser mysteries.
And Veronica, can you read that for us, please?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
The head of a wolf was worn in the mysteries of Isis because the wolf Anup was her warder and guardian during her search after Osiris in the underworld. The wolf, jackal, or dog was the guide of the sun and of the souls of the dead. The station of the wolf in the Egyptian planisphere is at the place of the vernal equinox, a point of commencement where we find the double holy house of Anup, the candidate as the Levator, am I saying it right?
Yeah.
Of Levator of French masonry still enters as a young wolf.
Okay, any questions about that? So you can see that the symbolism survives. I mean, even today, French, the new candidates in the French lodges, you enter as a wolf. So that carols all the way back to Egypt, as does Masonry itself, right? Okay. Unfortunately, we have no such insight into the Osirian mysteries because they were secret, but we do have many descriptions of the god himself. HPB cuts to the chase in this brief characterization of Osiris. Could we get a reader for this, please?
Yes, Maria, can you read that for us, please?
Yes, the sun was always called by the Egyptians the Eye of Osiris, and was himself the Logos, the first begotten, or it's kind of cut off here for me, I'm sorry. The first begotten or light, is that right?
That's right.
Made manifest to the world, which is the mind and divine intellect of the concealed. It is only by the sevenfold ray of this light that we can become cognizant of the Logos through the demiurge, regarding the latter as the creator of our planet and everything pertaining to it, and the former as the guiding force of that creator.
Thanks, Maria. So it's the Eye of Osiris is the guiding force, right? The one light, the light of the world, as it's often described. And then the demiurge, which is the sevenfold aspect, is what allows us to regain awareness of the one, right? It's the guiding force of the creator, of that creator is the I, and then the creator itself is the sevenfold one. Okay, let's see here now. By the way, whereas the right eye was attributed to Ra or Osiris, the left eye was attributed to his son, Horus. So you can see it there. You know, the two. I didn't label him, but the right eye is on the left side there. That would be the eye of Osiris, and then Horus's eye would be here, the eye of Horus, and then they're brought together in this sculpture. Yeah, and you could see that it really is two separate eyes, because you know they're not depicting a face here. There's no space here for the other features. It's the two eyes, right? Okay. So I was able to find a PDF of the beautifully illustrated manners and customs of the Egyptians cited in this text. Here's an illustration with text that reads, "Sacred tamarisk of Osiris, in the branches, the Bennu or phoenix, the soul of Osiris." You can see him up here. So lovely book. Okay, next up.
Francis?
Yeah.
Anne Veronica says that she read somewhere the eye of Osiris, the way it is drawn, it is the pineal gland.
Well, it would be naturally. That's very much like, you know, the pineal gland sits directly in the center of your head. And so metaphorically, it's the point in the center of the circle. And that is the inner doorway that leads to higher deity, and all at every level, you know. It's from that we build the Antakarana to the soul, and then to the monad, and then eventually all the way to the solar logos, right? So yeah, that's a good observation. All right, could we get a reader for this paragraph?
Yes, Chris, can you read that for us, please? Oops, I guess we lost Chris. Okay. Martha, can you read that for us, please? You're self-muted.
Yes, here we go. Much of the information concerning the rituals of the higher degrees of the Egyptian mysteries has been gleaned from an examination of the chambers and passageways in which the initiations are given. Under the temple of Serapis, destroyed by Theodosius, were found strange mechanical contrivances constructed by the priests in the subterranean crypts and caverns, where the nocturnal initiatory rites were celebrated. These machines indicate the severe tests of moral and physical courage undergone by the candidates. After passing through these torturous ways, the neophytes who survived the ordeals were ushered into the presence of Serapis, a noble and awe-inspiring figure illumined by unseen lights.
Okay, thank you, Martha. Any thoughts or questions about this paragraph? So how would an examination of the chambers and passageways in Egyptian temples reveal information about the rituals of initiation? Only minimally from artifacts and papyri that might have been found there, since the secrets of initiation were never illustrated or written. However, according to Ralston Skinner, as revealed in his amazing book, The Source of Measures, and Schwaller de Lubitsch, author of The Temple of Man, hypotheses can be put forward through a consideration of the mathematical relationships inherent in the temple walls, floors, doorways, as well as mathematical relationships within the friezes themselves. But let's wait for any further analysis, since we'll be considering the Egyptian mysteries in much greater depth during the upcoming chapters, the life and teachings of Thoth Hermes Trismegistus, the initiation of the pyramid, Isis, the Virgin of the World, and the Binbin table of Isis, the latter which is shown here. All of these are full chapters in the secret teachings. So those are just 4 chapters that we have looking forward to, and we'll really be considering the Egyptian mysteries that are just being touched on here in this Alexandrian, more Greek than Egyptian mystery school. However, just to whet our appetite, let's read a passage from Isha Swallow de Lubitsch, Herback, Egyptian Initiate. Now, this is fiction, but fiction based on years of archaeological research with her renowned husband, R.A. Swallow de Lubitsch. Can we get a reader for this passage?
Carrie, can you read that for us, please?
This work is an authentic reconstruction of the sacred science and spiritual disciplines as taught in the Temple of Karnak. 15 years research in the temples and tombs of Egypt enabled the author, Isha Swallow de Lubitsch, to decipher the hidden meanings of hieroglyphic symbolism. The exceptional circumstances of her sojourn in Egypt under the tutelage of her mentor and husband, R.A. Swallow de Lubitsch, placed the key in her possession. At a given signal, the door opened from within. The sage embraced Herback. "Go in then, my son, and may your destiny be fulfilled." Shaking all over, Herback crossed the threshold, under the eyes of a keeper who closed the heavy door. "We enter an inner world," said the sage, "where all the mysteries of the word are at work. The word whose face, Hur, is a mirror. Your own face, Herback, opens to the outer world by 7 doors. 3 are double, opening eastward and westward. The 7th is one and central, yet it has a double interior canal with a double function. The air of Shu bathes them all equally, but each takes from this same air, by adaptation, a different quality. The eyes, RT, receive Shu's light. The nostrils, Sher-T, breathe his air. The central door, the mouth, Ra, has a dual function, to admit offerings of food and to let the master of the house, the active word, emerge and show himself. Each door is specialized as to name and function, but the central door is known by the generic name of Ra, opening, entry. Note that the eye, RT, the nostril, Sher-T, and the ear, Mesjer, have the same letter R. You must learn the meaning of each door, and if you want to know where it leads you, study its form, name, place, and symbolism, and it will tell you its function.
Thank you, Carrie. Very well read. So reference to the ear, the skin, the 2 eyes, the tongue, the nose, etc., is similar to a quote we looked at in from the Anu Gita in the Secret Doctrine webinars. You can see there are the similarities. But is this description even close to what actually happened in the temples of ancient Egypt? There's no way of knowing, of course. There are those who believe that Isha was able to intuitively recall the actual Egyptian initiatory rites during her writing of this book. But whether that's true or not, her writings are the learned content reveals it to be far more than mere fantasy. Anybody has any occult training at all, when you read this, you recognize in it the ancient wisdom teachings. So comes highly recommended. It has a follow-up companion volume called Herbach Initiation, which is extremely involved, I should say. Yeah, it's a great pair of books. Okay, but back to the texts. I found no writings corroborating the existence of any, quote, strange mechanical contrivances, but there is a passage in Gnostics and Their Remains describing the subterranean spaces beneath the statue of Serapis. Can we get a reader for this, please?
Lynn, can you read that for us, please?
The very construction of the grand colossus of Serapis ingeniously set forth these ideas of his character. It was formed out of plates of all the metals artfully joined together to typify the harmonious union of different elements in the fabric of the universe. The moles at Machina Mundi. This statue was placed upon the summit of an artificial hill, whose vast interior was divided into vaulted halls, containing the famous library, ascended by a flight of 100 steps, a style of building totally diverse from the native Egyptian and the Grecian model, but exactly following the Indian usage, as may be seen by the Grand Pagoda of Shiva at Tanjore, and by the topes and dagobas of the Buddhists.
Thanks, Lynn. So let's take a look at the image in the middle of page 27. Can we get a reader for this, please?
Okay, Trudy, can you read that for us, please?
Serapis is often shown standing on the back of the sacred crocodile, carrying in his left hand a rule with which to measure the inundations of the Nile, and balancing with his right hand a curious emblem consisting of an animal with 3 heads. The first head, that of a lion, signified the present. The second head, that of a wolf, the past, and the third head, that of a dog, the future. The body with its 3 heads was enveloped by the twisted coils of a serpent. Figures of Serapis are occasionally accompanied by Cerberus, the 3-headed dog of Pluto, and like Jupiter, carry baskets of grain upon their heads.
Thank you. Okay, any thoughts or questions about this? A god standing on the back of a crocodile is symbolic of mastery over the lower realms. We were talking about this earlier, Harparchades, this is where that image shows up. The Egyptian Heracles, while in his youth, is often depicted standing on 2 crocodiles and grasping 2 pairs of serpents, symbolizing his command over the pairs of opposites. Additionally, he holds a lion, bull, and a scorpion, images of the fixed cross of the zodiac. The animal with 3 heads is most curious. In the image on the right, the central line is pretty clearly discernible, though it's difficult to make out the other 2. In this set of images, we see 2 extremes and something peculiar in the middle. On the far right, we have a 3-headed dog. By far the most prevalent image of Serapis as 3-headed animal. This is Cerberus, the 3-headed dog of Pluto, described in the text, famous in Greek mythology. On the left, a detail from the illustration, we have a lion-headed serpent. Oops, you can see it there on the left. A lion-headed serpent. and just bare indications of what might be a snout to the left and the right of its head. You can see on the left what I'm talking about. This image recalls the Gnostic illustration from the previous page. Remember, the Gnostics and the followers of Serapis lived in Alexandria together before and after the time of Christ. The central image is very peculiar. What is that animal under Serapis's hand? It looks more like a startled llama than a lion. At any rate, yeah, here we have the, I got these out of order. We have this lion-headed serpent on the right, which we looked at earlier, and it's very similar to what we have here, depicted sort of in 3D in this statue. Okay, so next up, can we get a reader? Actually, we're done, folks. That's this is a good stopping spot anyway. So yeah, I don't want to run us over too far. So thanks for attending. And do you want to announce the next
Right.
webinar time?
The next Secret Teaching of All Ages is Sunday, the 4th of October. And before that, we have the next Secret Doctrine coming up on the 20th of September. So,
okay,
hope to see you all there.
So that's 2 weeks, followed by 2 weeks to the 20th, and then 2 more weeks till this time, till the Secret Teachings again. So great. All right, I hope to see you on the 20th for the Secret Doctrine. Otherwise, we'll see you next month. And thanks very much for attending. Bye for now.
Bye, everybody.